Nobody tells you this part. You hear about the contracts, the endorsements, the sneaker deals. You see the cars, the mansions, the entourage. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you think, if I had that kind of money, I'd never have a problem again. But here's what they don't put on SportsCenter. 70% of NBA players are financially stressed within 5 years of retirement. Not broke, necessarily, but stressed, stretched, wondering where it went. And the ones who aren't, the ones who actually kept it, they didn't just budget better. They didn't just hire smarter accountants. They did something most people never talk about, because it makes you sound cold. It makes you sound ungrateful. They learn how to protect their wealth without becoming a different person. That's the tension nobody wants to sit with. Because the money doesn't just attract problems. It attracts people. People you love. People you grew up with. People who were there before the contract. And you can't just cut everyone off. That's not who you are. So what do you actually do? That's what this video is about. 7 ways NBA players protect their wealth without losing themselves in the process. Let's get into it. The first thing you have to understand is this: wealth doesn't change people. It reveals them. And I don't mean the people around you. I mean you. When the money arrives, real money, life-changing money, you find out very quickly what you actually believe about yourself. Whether you feel like you deserve it. Whether you trust your own judgment. Whether you think the people in your life love you, or love what you represent. Most NBA players come from nothing. Not middle-class struggling nothing. Real nothing. Neighborhoods where the default path is either sports, music, or survival. And then one day, the league calls. And everything shifts. But here's the part that breaks people: the external world changes overnight. The internal world doesn't. You still think like the kid who had to share shoes. You still feel guilty saying no. You still measure loyalty by how long someone's been around, not by whether they're actually good for you. And that's not weakness. That's just human. Way number 1, they separate the emotion from the infrastructure. The smartest players in the league, the ones still standing financially a decade after retirement, they made one critical decision early. They decided that their financial life and their personal life would operate on different systems. Not different people. Different systems. What does that mean in practice? It means you can love your cousin and still not make him your business manager. It means you can take care of your mom and still have a financial advisor she's never met approve every major expense. It means the people you trust emotionally are not automatically the people who handle your money. That sounds obvious when you say it out loud. But when your brother calls you at midnight saying he needs $40,000 to save his house, and he's the same brother who drove you to every tryout when you were 14, suddenly obvious gets a lot harder. The infrastructure exists precisely for that moment. Not to say no for you, but to give you a structure that makes the answer less personal, less cruel, less like a rejection of where you came from. It's not my decision. I have a process I follow. 6 words. And they save relationships that money would otherwise destroy. There's a concept in behavioral economics called sudden wealth syndrome. It's not a joke. Psychologists actually study it. And what they find is that when people receive large amounts of money in a short period of time, lottery winners, athletes, inheritance recipients, the psychological pressure is almost identical to trauma. Because your brain wasn't built for it. Evolution didn't prepare you for the moment when everyone in your zip code suddenly needs something from you. When your phone becomes a request machine. When generosity stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like a tax. And the athletes who collapse financially, most of them weren't irresponsible. Most of them were just too generous, too fast, with no structure around it. Way number 2, they give, but they give on a schedule. This one sounds almost too simple. But the execution is where it gets interesting. The players who protect their wealth long-term don't stop giving. They systematize it. They allocate a fixed percentage of their income. Some use 5%, some use 10%, some more, and that becomes the giving budget. Family requests, friends, community, charity. All of it comes from that pool. When the pool is empty, it's empty. Until next month. What this does psychologically is profound. It removes guilt from the equation. Because you're not saying I won't help you. You're saying I already gave this month. You're on the list for next. The money was always going out. The only thing that changed is that you decided where, when, and how much. Kevin Durant once said in an interview that he had to learn the difference between being generous and being a resource. Generous is a choice. A resource is something people extract from. And nobody talks about that transition. The moment you realize some people in your life don't actually see you, they see a solution to their problem. That's not cynicism. That's just pattern recognition. The schedule protects you from that pattern. But it also does something else. It forces you to think about who you're giving to. When resources are unlimited, or feel unlimited, you stop being intentional. When they're capped, you prioritize. And prioritization is just another word for clarity. Clarity about who matters. Clarity about what helping actually means. Clarity about whether you're building someone up or just making yourself feel less guilty for having more than them. That last one is uncomfortable. But it's worth sitting with. Let me tell you about a pattern that shows up over and over again in the stories of athletes who lost everything. It's not the cars. It's not the houses. It's not even the bad investments, though those play a role. It's the inner circle problem. Here's how it typically goes. A player gets drafted. He buys his mom a house, which is beautiful and right. He takes care of his siblings. He brings his childhood friends along for the ride. He hires people he trusts over people who are qualified. And for a while, it works. Because the money is coming in faster than it's going out. The math still functions even when the decisions are bad. But then the contract ends. Or the injury happens. Or the endorsements dry up. And suddenly you're looking at your finances and realizing that for the past 8 years, you've been running a small government. 15 people on indirect payroll. 3 homes you're maintaining. A business your cousin runs that hasn't turned a profit in 4 years. And you can't just shut it all down. Because these are your people. Way number 3, they build a board, not an entourage. The difference between an entourage and a board is simple. An entourage exists to serve you in the present. A board exists to protect you in the future. An entourage tells you what you want to hear. A board tells you what you need to know. LeBron James is probably the most studied example of this in modern sports. By his mid-20s, he had assembled around him not just friends and family, but a genuine team of professionals. A business manager. A financial advisor. A lawyer. A brand strategist. People with actual expertise, actual accountability, actual skin in the game. And here's the thing people miss about LeBron's model. He didn't cut off his childhood friends. Maverick Carter, his longtime business partner, grew up with him in Akron. The relationship was real. But LeBron invested in developing that relationship into something professionally viable, not just emotionally comfortable. That's a different move entirely. Most people think protecting your wealth means building walls. It actually means building the right table. And being very intentional about who sits at it. Because the people at your table shape your decisions. They shape what questions get asked. They shape what risks feel acceptable. They shape, over time, who you become. And if everyone at your table needs something from you, if none of them can afford to tell you the truth because their livelihood depends on your approval, then you're not surrounded by advisors. You're surrounded by mirrors that only show you what you want to see. That's not protection. That's a slow leak. There's a moment every high-earning athlete eventually faces. It doesn't come with a warning. It usually comes disguised as a normal conversation. Someone you love, someone who is genuinely there for you, asks you for something that crosses a line. Not dramatically. Not obviously. Just slightly further than you've ever gone before. And you feel it. That pull. That specific discomfort that lives somewhere between guilt and resentment. Because you know that if you say yes, you're setting a new floor. And once you set a new floor, it becomes the ceiling for the next ask. Way number 4, they learn the difference between a loan and a gift. This one took a lot of athletes years to figure out. Some never do. Here's the reality. When someone with significant wealth gives money to someone close to them, a family member, a childhood friend, and calls it a loan, they're not making a financial decision. They're making an emotional one. They're creating a fiction that protects both parties in the moment. The giver doesn't feel like they're just handing money away. The receiver doesn't feel like charity. But the loan almost never gets paid back. And now you have a financial transaction sitting in the middle of a personal relationship. Every time you see that person, the debt is in the room with you. Successful athletes, the ones who figured this out, made a simple rule. If you give it, give it. Don't call it a loan unless you're genuinely prepared to collect. And if you're not prepared to collect, which, let's be honest, most people aren't when it comes to family, then call it what it is. A gift. With a limit. And no repeat. Because the moment you frame it as a gift, something shifts. The other person can't come back and ask for the second installment of a loan that doesn't exist. The relationship stays clean. The expectation resets. And you stop carrying the quiet resentment of someone who's owed something they'll never see again. Way number 5, they invest in assets that don't require explanation. Real estate. Index funds. Ownership stakes in businesses outside their immediate circle. The reason this matters isn't purely financial. It's structural. When your wealth lives in assets, not in cash sitting in an account, it becomes psychologically harder to give away impulsively. You can't Venmo someone your real estate portfolio at midnight. There's friction. And friction, in moments of emotional pressure, is your best friend. Draymond Green talked about this in a podcast a few years back. He said the best financial advice he ever got was simple: make your money hard to reach. Not impossible. Just hard enough that you have to think twice before you move it. Because most bad financial decisions aren't made after careful reflection. They're made in the middle of a conversation. In the heat of a moment. When someone you care about is sitting across from you and the easiest thing in the world is to just say yes. Friction buys you time. And time buys you clarity. We need to talk about something that doesn't get enough airtime in these conversations. The loneliness of it. Because that's the part nobody prepares you for. You can read every personal finance book ever written. You can hire the best advisors in the business. You can systematize your giving, build your board, separate emotion from infrastructure. And you'll still have nights where you wonder if the people around you actually know you. Or if they know your balance sheet. That's not paranoia. That's the natural consequence of operating at a level most people around you have never experienced. And no amount of financial strategy makes that feeling go away. Way number 6, they invest deliberately in relationships that have nothing to do with money. This one sounds soft. It isn't. The athletes who maintain the healthiest financial lives long-term are almost always the ones who found communities, friendships, and spaces completely disconnected from their wealth. Places where nobody cared about the contract. Where the conversation was never about money because everyone in the room had their own. Some found it in faith communities. Some in recreational sports leagues after retirement. Some in mastermind groups with other athletes who understood the specific pressure of sudden wealth without needing it explained. The common thread wasn't the environment. It was the dynamic. Relationships built on equality. On mutual respect. On something other than need. And here's why this protects your wealth in a way that spreadsheets can't. When you have relationships in your life that are genuinely reciprocal, where you're not always the one giving, the one solving, the one absorbing everyone else's problems, your decision-making changes. You stop making financial choices out of loneliness. Out of the need to feel needed. Out of the quiet fear that if you say no enough times, everyone will leave. Because you know they won't. Because you have people in your life who aren't there for what you can do for them. That security, that emotional security, is worth more than any investment portfolio. Vince Carter played in the NBA for 22 years. In interviews after retirement, he was remarkably candid about something most athletes never admit. He said that the players who stayed grounded financially were almost never the ones who were just disciplined with money. They were the ones who were fulfilled outside of money, who had something to come home to that didn't have a price tag on it. Discipline without fulfillment is just white-knuckling it. Eventually the grip loosens. But when you're genuinely full, when the non-financial parts of your life are actually working, the money stops being a substitute for everything else. It becomes what it was always supposed to be. A tool. Not an identity. Not a measure of your worth. Not the reason people stay. Just a tool. And tools are much easier to manage when you're not emotionally dependent on them. If you've made it this far into the video with me, and I mean actually here, actually listening, I want to take a second to say something real. Hit that subscribe button. Join this channel. Because what we do here isn't hype. It isn't highlight reels of other people's success designed to make you feel behind. It's honest conversation about money, decisions, and the kind of life you're actually trying to build. And if this video gave you something, one idea, one shift, one moment where you thought, yeah, that's exactly it, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because the people who need this most are usually the ones nobody's having this conversation with. Alright, back to it. Because here's what we haven't talked about yet. And it might be the most important piece. All 6 ways we've covered, the systems, the boards, the boundaries, the assets, the relationships, none of them work if you haven't dealt with one specific thing first. The story you tell yourself about where you came from. Way number 7, they redefine what loyalty actually means. This is where it gets deep. And this is where most people, athletes or not, get it completely wrong. There's a version of loyalty that's really just guilt in a suit. It looks noble. It sounds noble. I never forgot where I came from. I take care of my people. I don't turn my back on anyone. But underneath it, if you're honest, is fear. Fear of being seen as someone who changed. Fear of being called out by the people who knew you before. Fear that your success somehow makes you a traitor to everyone who didn't make it out. And so you keep giving. Keep absorbing. Keep saying yes when every instinct tells you to stop. Not because it's right. Because it's safe. The players who truly protected their wealth and their relationships figured out a different definition of loyalty. Loyalty isn't proximity. It isn't access. It isn't saying yes to every request from everyone who's known you long enough. Loyalty is wanting the best for someone. Even when the best thing you can do for them is say no. Even when saying no costs you their approval. Even when it makes you the villain in a story you didn't write. Real loyalty sometimes looks like refusal. Like structure. Like having a conversation that's hard and honest instead of easy and expensive. Dwayne Wade talked about this in the context of his family. He said at some point he realized that writing checks wasn't the same as showing up. That money had become a way to manage relationships from a distance, to feel present without actually being present. And the moment he understood that, everything changed. Not just financially. Relationally. Because the people who truly loved him didn't need the check. They needed him. His time. His attention. His actual presence in their lives. And the people who only called when they needed the check? Well, that told him everything he needed to know. So here's where we land. 7 ways. 7 shifts. 7 things the players who actually kept their wealth did differently. But if you've been listening, really listening, you already know this was never actually about NBA players. It was about you. About the moment the money arrives in your life, whatever form that takes, and you realize that the hardest part isn't making it. It isn't even keeping it. It's figuring out who you are when you have it. Because money doesn't build character. It just removes the excuses for not having one. The players who lost everything weren't stupid. They were careless. They were human. They loved people who didn't always deserve it. They said yes when they should have said no. They confused generosity with guilt and loyalty with fear. And somewhere along the way, they forgot the most important thing. That you cannot take care of anyone else if you don't first build something solid enough to stand on. That's not selfishness. That's just architecture. The strongest bridge isn't the one that holds everyone at once. It's the one built carefully enough that it's still standing 20 years from now. You don't have to cut everyone off. You don't have to become cold. You don't have to build walls and live behind them and call it wisdom. You just have to decide, clearly, honestly, without apology, what you're building. And who gets to be part of it. That decision is yours. Nobody else can make it for you. No advisor, no system, no video on the internet. Just you. In the quiet. With everything you know about yourself. Take care of your money. But more than that, take care of the person managing it. Because that person is you. And you're worth protecting too. If this video made you think, hit that subscribe button and come back tomorrow. We do this every day. And share this with 5 people in your life who are building something real. They need to hear this more than they know. And leave a comment below. Not just a like, an actual comment. Tell me what hit different. Tell me what you're working through. And tell me what you want us to cover next. I read them. Every single one. See you in the next one.